Hi, I'm Vanessa, and I will be doing a Slay the Spire speedrun. The category I'm going to be running is called 4-Character Unseated, and our goal in this category is to defeat the final boss with each character. I'll be using a variety of glitches through these runs in order to add consistency as well as speed up the run. So we'll be starting out with Defect. We want to pick the fastest path, so we're looking for everything except combats. Question marks, campfires, shops, they're all beneficial. So at this shop, I pick up a Static Discharge. The general strategy for Defect is to play powers that generate and evoke our lightning orbs. Static Discharge is one of the best cards to do this with. You'll see as I go through the run that I'm removing my defense whenever possible. In this speed run, we want to kill them as fast as possible, and defense do not help us accomplish that. Now, we do get forced into an elite here, and generally we try to avoid elites because they're slower than combats, which we already don't want. But fortunately this one was the sentries, and this upgraded Static Discharge will make pretty quick work of them. Now we did get a second Static Discharge off of them, and I'm gonna upgrade that here. These two upgraded Static Discharges will really make quick work of the Hexaghost. I accidentally played that Defend there, and that reduced a lot of the Static Discharge damage. So I'm gonna save and quit the fight and redo it so that I can kill the Hexaghost a lot quicker. Now, when we're looking at the boss, we want to ideally get a Bias Cognition to boost damage or an Electrodynamics for AoE, and fortunately we got the Bias Cognition, which will really help with damage as we get into these slightly more difficult fights. And in this fight you can see just how much damage these lightning orbs with this Bias Cognition can do, and why it's such a beneficial thing. Now, at this shop, I'm going to use a technique called Node Duplication, and by switching to slow mode, I can visit this same shop twice. This is really useful because I want a couple more powers to finish up this deck, and duping allows me to visit more shops so that I can get these powers and just remove cards from my deck in general. Now I accidentally mispathed here. The right path has a lot less combats, so I wanted to go there. Unfortunately I didn't, but our deck is pretty strong right now, so the only disadvantage is losing time, and other than that we should be pretty well off. The other disadvantage that comes from this myth's path is that we're going to be visiting a lot less question marks, so we're getting less events. There are a lot of Act 2 events that can help us, the main one being the Vampires event. It adds bites to our decks and removes our strikes, and if you go quick enough, you can just skip adding the bites, so it's really just removing all your strikes, which is pretty good when we don't want them. Because I have a lot less question marks, I'm gonna use some more Node Duplication to duplicate these question marks and try and find that Vampires event. Now, unfortunately, I didn't find it, but our deck is still pretty thin, so it's not the end of the world, and we still should be fine. Now I am pretty low here, so I'm going to use a trick that's very similar to Node Duplication, called Node Doubling. and I am going to rest twice to make sure I have enough health to survive this fight without dying. So at this point, there's not too much more we're looking for our deck. Ideally, we'll get an Electrodynamics to help with the AoE in the rest of the game, and we want some form of removal relic to thin out our deck. Unfortunately, we didn't get anything that can remove cards from our deck, but I took Bell and did a trick called Screen Layer Removal to skip over getting the curse and only add the relics that you would get from the bell itself. So at this point, because we weren't able to get a removal relic, I'm gonna start duping these shops so that I can remove my strikes and thin out my deck to be really consistent. The cards we have in our deck are really strong and work great together, so I want to play them as much as possible instead of spending my time playing strikes. Now, all the fights from this point onwards are gonna look pretty similar. We're gonna be playing our powers and trying to clear through things as quick as possible, and in any long fights we have, the Thunderstrike will come in clutch, putting in a bunch of damage. We've been fortunate enough to not have any extended fights, but surely we'll run into one soon, and there we run into one. So in a fight like this, our powers will be constantly generating lightning orbs, and our Thunderstrike will be a big source of damage to finish off this fight. So you'll see this turn just how much this Thunderstrike can scale and really put in work and a lot of damage into these more extended fights. I'm gonna pick up a defragment just because more powers are a good thing at this point, and we can get even more focus and help kill these last couple enemies even quicker. So again, in these fights, we're really just playing our powers whenever possible and as soon as we draw them, hoping to amplify them if we can, and then use Thunderstrike to finish off these fights. Unfortunately, this Act 3 had quite a few fights, so we are just gonna kind of have to sit here and go through these fights together for a bit longer. So at this point, I am pretty low, so I'm gonna dupe this rest site so that I can rest and still upgrade my Amplify. The Amplify will put in a lot of work, and fortunately we got the double static discharge to start off with, so whenever we take damage, we'll be channeling 8 lightning orbs, and these guys hit us twice each turn. So we'll be channeling 16 lightning orbs, which really just plows through this fight. So the next character we'll be playing is Silent. The Silent is interesting because there are 2 distinct strategies. The Lucky strategy involves a card called Grand Finale, and it revolves around thinning out your deck enough, typically through something like Pandora's Box, in order to always have an empty draw pile. This allows you to play Grand Finale repeatedly for big damage. The other strategy is shivs. Shivs are a zero cost attack that scale really well. And so you kind of have to get really lucky for Grand Finale, so typically you'll end up going shivs. So I pick up a Blade Dance, I pick up a Terror, and I kind of start planning around this shiv strategy. I pick up a Masterful Stab just as another zero cost attack that does a lot of damage. That should help me a lot with these hallway fights and the slime boss. I pick up this Bottled Flame, and I bottle the Masterful Stab to try and get some extra early damage in on these hallway fights, and really look to replay it before I take too much damage and it costs too much. I set up the node dupe on this rest site. This allows me to fight the boss twice and adds a lot of consistency at the sake of time, but it just makes it a lot easier to repeatedly do what you want. So ideally from this boss, if we are trying to do the Grand Finale strat, we will pick up a Grand Finale and some sort of removal relic like Pandora's Box or Astrolabe. Now those aren't typically relics that can remove cards, but through the use of glitches they can. I did not get Grand Finale, so I just pick up Last Knife as a pretty strong attack to help me fight this boss a second time. Now you'll see that the cards I picked up from Astrolabe didn't get added there. Since I had that campfire buffered, I can pick the cards with Astrolabe and open my map before they get added, and this effectively allows me to remove those 3 cards. I did get offered the Grand Finale, and I took it on the off chance that I got P-Box, and I did get Pandora's Box. Now, Pandora's Box replaces all the strikes and defends in your deck with new cards, but you can do that same trick I was talking about before, called Screen Layer Removal, to stop the new cards from being added, so it just removes all your strikes and defense. So now I'm on an 8-card deck with Grand Finale. Grand Finale is only playable when your draw pile is empty, so I want to get down to 7 cards as fast as possible. I go to the combat on the left, even though there was a path with no combats on the right, because getting these removals from this shop so that I can play my Grand Finale is really important. So because I want these removals, I'm going to go ahead and attempt to duplicate this shop, and I got it, so I'm going to remove twice and pick up this Dolly's Mirror. Unfortunately, Dolly's Mirror adding the card is really slow in slow mode, and I didn't actually add the copy of Grand Finale. So I still only have 1 Grand Finale, but I have a 6-card deck, so I can always play my Grand Finale on turn 1. This allows my deck to do a lot of damage really quickly, and is just really nice. Now at this shop you'll see I remove again. Even though I'm at 7 cards, this removal brings me down to 6, which with Terror exhausting brings my deck down to 5 cards on every turn after the first. This allows me to play Grand Finale on the turns in which I'm only drawing 5 cards, and makes the deck much more consistent. I also picked up a Quick Slash a while ago. Quick Slash is really important because I can play Grand Finale and then Quick Slash to replay the Grand Finale. I do a bit of a misplay there and accidentally threw in a Masterful Stab, so I couldn't. But Grand Finale and Quick Slash will let me play Grand Finale a second time. So at this point, all my fights are going to look really similar. It's going to be Grand Finale, and if they somehow live, it's Quick Slash to replay Grand Finale, and if they still somehow live, it is ending the turn, and then next turn doing the same thing with another Grand Finale, Quick Slash Grand Finale. So at this point, I'm trying to just go as quick as possible. My deck is more than enough damage to kill the final boss, so I don't really need any cards, and I'm not particularly looking to add anything. I just kind of run through these hallway fights as quickly as possible, moving on to the next one on my way to the boss. Now, I ran into the transient here, which is really unfortunate. The transient is a pretty big time loss when you're speedrunning this game, and is generally very unlucky. He forces you to sit there for 5 turns and do nothing but watch him attack, and it is very annoying and just loses a lot of time. Fortunately, with my 5-card deck, I can play Grand Finale and not particularly worry about his damage. And so now the only fight we have left is the final boss. And in this fight, this Liquid Memories with Sacred Bark will allow me to redraw my Grand Finale and Quick Slash, which will let me kill this guy on turn 1. So the next character we'll be running is Ironclad. Ironclad's strategy revolves around playing cards that increase your strength and playing multi-hit attacks that turn this extra strength into a lot of bonus damage. Now, one of the better cards to do this with is Flex. Flex gains you 2 strength until the end of the turn, and when it's upgraded it gains you 4 strength. Adding 4 strength for free on any attack that hits more than once is really strong. That's why I pick up the Twin Strike to take advantage of the Flex even more. I end up picking up a second Flex here. It's just a very strong way to scale our attacks that doesn't really have a downside. At this shop, I pick up Juzu Bracelet. Juzu is one of the best relics in the game for saving time in speedruns. It allows you to guarantee that your question marks aren't combats, and since combats are a lot slower than events, by avoiding them, you save a lot of time. And then, just like I did with the Silent, I duped this rest site so that I can fight this boss twice. Now, from this boss, I pick up Limit Break. Limit Break doubles our strength, and this scales our damage really quickly. And with any way to replay the Limit Break, this damage can get out of hand very fast. So here you can see the strength of Limit Break. We doubled our strength from 8 to 16, and after the Flex removes the 8 at the end of the turn, we're left with a permanent 8 strength. This just scales our damage incredibly quickly and allows us to fight this second boss super easily. Now, because I got Busted Crown, I don't get many card choices, and so I end up skipping there, and I pick up a Slaver's Collar just as some extra incidental energy. So you can see there just how much this flex and limit break can amplify the damage of our attacks. We end up killing them both within the first 2 turns, and that will be a common occurrence within this deck and within the rest of this run. Now this shop has a lot of good options to pick. Offering allows us to draw our deck more consistently, Double Tap allows us to play a big attack twice, and Brimstone gains us a bunch of strength. Since I already have the limit break to double my strength, I picked up the Brimstone, and I used my leftover gold to pick up that Double Tap. I finally upgraded the limit break, and what this means is that it now doesn't exhaust. That allows me to play it multiple times in the same fight if I draw it, which will really ramp up our strength. So again, I'm just looking to remove defense and thin out our deck in order to play our attacks more often and draw into our flexes and our limit breaks and our multi-hits and everything we want. Now I got Sword Boomerang from that fight. Sword Boomerang hits for 3 times before it's upgraded, and when it is upgraded, it hits 4 times. This, tied with our lot of bonus strength, makes it scale super quick and do quite a bit of damage. Again, I'm gonna dupe this rest site. This will allow me to get a couple extra upgrades in before this fight. I really want that upgraded Sword Boomerang, and I really want that upgraded Battle Trance, and by duping this rest site, I was able to get both of them. So this fight's going to be pretty standard. We're going to try and play our flexes, play our limit breaks, and then double tap our attacks to kill as quickly as possible. This fight isn't the quickest, but it definitely, we're not at any risk of dying, which is nice. So I don't like the boss I was offered. This boss doesn't super bode well for me, so I'm gonna do a trick called Infinite Reroll. By picking a node, opening the deck, going to the node, closing the deck, and pressing Proceed, I can generate a new Act 3. This can let me fight a much more advantageous boss, which will end up saving time and make the final fight a lot easier. I'm going to dupe this shop so that I can get an extra remove in. Again, we have quite a strong deck, so we just want to remove the cards that aren't super useful for it, and I pick up a Chemical X in case I get Whirlwind. Whirlwind is a super strong multi-hitter if you do get it. Other than this, there's not too much to add in here. I'm just kind of playing my multi-hit attacks and trying to kill everything as quickly as possible for the last half of this act. I missed a Sword Boomerang there because I wasn't... It popped up at the last second. A second Sword Boomerang is always useful, and would have been nice to acquire, but with the current state of our deck, it will not end up mattering too much. So, as we get into the end of this act, we don't have too much to worry about. The final boss is Donudeka. As I said earlier, I specifically chose to fight them because I was hoping for a whirlwind. But regardless, our multi-hitters will make quick work of them. I did end up duping that rest site to have a backup in case I drew poorly. These guys can still be a bit scary, so I wanted to have the safety in place if I needed it, but in the end, I'm just going to be playing my multi-hit attacks and trying to kill them as quick as possible. So the last character we will be running is Watcher. Watcher's strategy revolves pretty much entirely around the Wrath stance. Watcher has the ability to switch between stances, and when she is in Wrath, she deals double damage and receives double damage. Dealing double damage is incredibly strong, so your goal is to enter Wrath and play a bunch of attacks so that you kill them before they can kill you. So I pick up a couple early Carve Realities. Carve Reality is just a generally strong attack that adds a Smite to your hand, which is a really strong attack. So at this shop, I remove Vigilance. When playing the game normally, this is something that's really risky to do. I now have no way to leave the Wrath stance, so I'm always stuck taking double damage. The nice thing is that this doesn't matter if you just kill them first. At that shop, I also picked up a Flex Potion. Flex Potion gains you 5 strength until the end of turn, and in Wrath this is effectively doubled to 10 strength since you deal double damage. Just like in the previous runs, I'm going to double these campfires so that I can set up to double the boss. I pick Empty Cage to remove a couple cards, and then open Map to get back to the campfire and to fight the boss again. So you're gonna see a glitch called Astrolabe Skip. I've talked previously about Astrolabe removing cards, and this is how you do it. You start by taking Astrolabe and mashing Proceed. That, like you saw, let me get Astrolabe in Act 2 instead of Act 1. And then you pick the node you want to visit and press Escape. This buffers that node so that you can visit it whenever you want by opening the map. And at that point, you simply pick the cards and open the map to teleport to the node before you get the cards. I picked up a relic called Mutagens from that event there. That's that orange triangle looking one. It gives me 3 extra strength to turn 1, and with Wrath Stance is effectively doubled to 6. Because I now have this 8 bonus strength due to Vajra as well and Wrath form, I picked up a Tantrum, which will be a super strong multi-hitter. To help out this Tantrum even more, I picked up a Wreath of Flame, and then bottled the Tantrum so that I can always draw the Tantrum when I have this massive amount of early strength. Now again, like I've done for a lot of the other bosses, I'm going to dupe this node. This way I can safely come back if I need to. I thought about opening the map and going back to the rest site, but I did the math and I will live at 1 health, so I just take the fight as is. And I take Pandora's box to remove the last strike I have in my deck. Now, similarly with the Ironclad, I don't like this Act 3 boss, so I'm going to do the infinite reroll glitch that I mentioned until I get one that I do want. So these combats are all going to look very similar. It is me playing a card to enter Wrath. It is me playing a bunch of attacks, and then hopefully everything dies. Now again, this path does have a couple more combats than I would like, so I'm going to be sitting here and finishing up these combats for a little bit longer. And there you can see just the strength of Wreath of Flame with mutagens and Vajra and the multi-hit that is Tantrum, dealing upwards of 180 damage on the opening turn. Now we do run into a kind of unlucky transient here, and this will lose us a fair bit of time. So I tried to shortcut how much damage I needed to do to the transient there, and I took a very, very large chunk of my health bar. Because I'm now really low, I'm gonna dupe these rest sites in order to sleep twice and have some resemblance of a health bar going into this final boss. Now, I forgot to play the strength potion on turn 1, but I think at this point it is faster for me to just finish the fight instead of saving and quitting. Unfortunately, he healed back up to half, but he should be dead next turn. And that is time.